Good evening, everyone. We are back in Deuteronomy Chapter 2. Deuteronomy Chapter 2. Yesterday, when we were introducing the book of Deuteronomy, I still want to bring ourselves back to the point where Moses is now describing or recalling the failures of the first generation of the men of war, those 20 years and above, called an evil generation, and they all died in the wilderness. And Moses was reiterating or recalling all these episodes with the next generations, which is those who were 20 and below, who came out of Egypt, as well as those who were born in the wilderness. And these were what God calls the innocents, that they did not have the ability to choose good and evil. And God drew a line at age 20. And in this book of Deuteronomy, Moses is now resetting the stage for these young ones as he describes to them all the failures as well as the faithfulness of God, that through this new generation that they will be fulfilled, that God had promised the land to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the descendants, and this generation or this new generation would be the one that will go and possess the land. Now, in this first generation, you find that they remained in the wilderness for about 40 years, and including Moses, who was not allowed to enter. And we saw how the God was so angry with them that after all that they have gone through and seen the hand of God at every stage and every corner, yet they did not have the faith to enter to possess the promised land. Now, as we begin, I would like to draw your attention to a map. Let me draw your attention to how and where I think the Exodus is, the route itself, and where we are now in the book of Deuteronomy. First of all, right now we're talking about this area here, and that is the plains of Moab. And that is Deuteronomy chapter 1. Now, if you recall, they came out from here, Goshen, and I think they went down this way. And I think Sinai is here. What essentially happened in Deuteronomy chapter 1 is that after this, they came up to this place. And I think this would be Kadesh Barnea. And they were supposed to enter into the promised land. So let me just use a different color. This is a place where they were supposed to go. And because they did not believe, they came back down. They came back down to this part. And I think what they did was they circled around here for 40 years. Now, in chapter 2, where we are now, we are going to see the entire story being recalled. And that story will now bring them up north. And as they go up north, this is the place they're going, all the way. And you would have to see that this would be in the land of Edom, land of Ammon, land of Moab, and then we come to the land of the Amorites, and then Bashan. Now, we will be looking at this throughout the chapter today, but it is just important for us to just have a feel that all the action is taking place here. And eventually, they actually crossed the Jordan from here. Right? This would be the final entry. Now, what is important for today is that you find that the warfare here is going to be in very great, and this is a recollection of Numbers, right? Numbers 21 and thereabouts. And so this is the picture of Deuteronomy chapter 2. And so if you have a good memory, remembering what I had told you, it says we turned and journeyed, meaning pull out the stakes. Every time you see the word journey, it literally means to pull out. But pull out doesn't sound good in the English. So the translators use the word journey. They started on a journey. But visually speaking, they lifted up the tent, they folded the tent, they removed the pegs, and they started their way into the wilderness of the way of the Red Sea. Now, the way of the Red Sea may not be as nice as we want to call it. We should call it Yam Suf. Because yesterday, when we looked at chapter 1, and that would be in chapter 1, verse 1, we see that same word, Suf, right? Except that today in chapter 2, the translators decided not to use the word Suf, but to translate as Red Sea. And that name has been stuck with us ever since. And so the sea that they crossed wasn't really called Red Sea, but probably called Yam Suf. And we would know this as the Gulf of Aqaba. So the Lord spoke to me, and we skirted Mount Seir for many days. Mount Seir is in Edom, and Edom is the name of Esau, the brother of Jacob, which means that they are relatives there. And the Lord spoke to me saying, now every time you see this word, the Lord spoke to me. These are very important words because these are words that Moses is now telling the young Israelites, the children of Israel, that this is what God said. This is not my choice of doing. And as God said to do this, we do. And so it says, you have skirted this mountain. And the idea of skirting the mountain looks this way. If this is the mountain, skirting essentially means we go around and around and around. That's the idea, right? That's the idea. You've skirted this mountain, Mount Seir, right? Mount Seir, long enough. Now turn northward. So remember, if Mount Seir is in Edom, what is northward? Northward is going up north, and you'll be crossing the territory. You see, command the people saying, you are about to pass through the territory of your brethren, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir, and they will be afraid of you. Now, obviously, people will be hearing about the Israelites. And if they came in large numbers, and if we are not mistaken, probably in the region of 1.5 to 2 million people, they will be afraid of you. But these are the descendants of Esau, and they are now traveling through, pass through. Now, the idea of passing through is to avar. Avar, it comes from the word Hebrew, ever. It's like Abraham coming down to the promised land, and he walked all the way down from north, all the way down to Beersheba, right? And this is the same idea, pass through. Just walk past, don't go anywhere else. Therefore, watch yourselves carefully. Now, the idea here is watch yourself carefully. In verse 4. And the idea here of watch is to keep or guard with might. Means you have the power to guard yourself with all your strength, right? Guard yourself with all your strength. The idea here is, this word comes from a later time that we will see in chapter 6. Love the Lord your God with all your strength. And that's the same word, me'od. So guard yourselves with everything you've got. Do not meddle with them. The idea of meddling here is to excite them. And to excite them means to fight. So don't stir them up. And the reason is, for God says, I will not give you any of their land. No, not so much as one footstep. The idea of a footstep is a place to put a foot. This is a place to put a foot. God says, I'm not going to give you their land. Not even 1 foot. Well, in the modern sense, 1 foot. Then this is the expression. I am not giving you not even 1 foot of the land. Meaning a place to put 1 foot. Not even that. Why? Well, everything that God does has a purpose. Because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. So God is a faithful God. God is an honorable God. Back in the book of Genesis, when we were told that Esau had a new name, and the name that was given to him was Edom. And Edom lived in Mount Seir region. And this is the place. This is the relatives' place. And God has given them, and there is no reason for God to take it away. And so it is for their possession. It was given to them as an inheritance. All right? So this is the word inheritance. It would be interesting for us to understand that the Israelites were not the only one who had the inheritance of land. God gave Seir or Edom, that entire place, to Esau or Esau. And the Edomites are now living there, and it was their possession, their inheritance. Except now the Israelites are on their way to possess it one day, their own land. And so God had actually parceled out the entire area there. The Egyptians had their land. God says, don't touch, not yours. Now, in this case, at Mount Seir, don't touch. You are not to excite them, not go to war, don't take anything. God is not going to give you not 1 foot. You shall buy food from them with money that you may eat, And you shall also buy water from them with money that you may drink. Now, what happened to water from the rock? What happened to manna from heaven? So there is no more, as we can tell at this point in time. And so God says, use your money. What does this mean? It means that you need to do trade. And to trade, it means that you are friendly. You are not an enemy. That's what you are offering. You're offering a peaceful entry. Now, you notice there are no border guards, there are no border fences those days. So they'll just come by. The highway that cuts right across from south to north is called the King's Highway. It's called the King's Highway from long, long ago, where the people would travel that entire pathway for trade. Now, we call highways today where you've got nice roads and tar. They call it highway because it's just a thoroughfare of rocky roads. Verse 7. For the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hand. He knows you're trudging through this great wilderness. Verse 7. The idea of trudging through. This is actually an English word that's placed in by the translator. Basically, it is about walking. And if you have been to the Middle East and into this part of the world, you know that walking is a pastime. That's part of life. And the roads that they walk, in many cases, are not easy to walk. They're not flat and they are not straight. And in many cases, they are rocky. And some cases, they are treacherous. And so God says, I know that the roads that you have taken, it's not easy in this great desert. These 40 years, the Lord your God has been with you. You have lacked nothing. And this is important. Although they did not enter into the promised land, God provided. You can see the faithfulness of God. God is a faithful God, even though they had sinned against God. And though they may have repented and turned back, God says, no, I'm not going to listen to you, because God's mind has been made up, because after all this while, they refused to trust God to enter into the promised land. And so now they are going around for 40 years right here. And God says, I have been with you. You have lacked nothing. So God has taken care of you, even though God has forbidden you to enter into the blessings of the promised land. That was all. And you can recall Moses is part of this group. And when we pass beyond our brethren, the descendants of Esau, who dwell in Seir, away from the road of the plain, away from Elat, from Etzion, Geber. Now, Elat would be the tip of the Aqaba. The tip of the Aqaba. So we turn and pass by the way of the wilderness of Moab. So they came up to the eastern side of the Dead Sea. God did not allow them to enter into the promised land, even though when they could at that point in time. And then the Lord said to me, do not harass Moab, nor contend with them in battle. Verse 9. First of all, do not harass Moab. Harass means to besiege, to shut in. Besiege. These are all tactics of war. So they're saying, don't show any hostility to the Moab, right? Do not stir them. This is the same word Do not excite them. That's what God is saying. Don't excite them. So this, what we have here is an A and a B. So harassing Moab means to contend with them in battle. So it's quite interesting that the way the Hebrew expresses is in twos or threes. And remember, this is for emphasis. And what is the emphasis? Don't do anything with the Moab. Why? Because they are also brethren. First of all, don't touch the descendants of Esau. Now, God says, I will not give you any of their land as an inheritance because I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession. Remember, back in Genesis chapter 19 and 20. 19 would be Sodom and Gomorrah, and 20 would be when 19 and 20 would be when we see Lot and had children by the daughters. We have Moab and we have Ammon, right? The Ammonites and the Moabites. They are all descendants of relatives. Who is Lot? The nephew of Abraham. And so these are all family. And with family, do not fight. Right? Do not fight. In verse 10, we saw that the Emim, right? The Emim had dwelt there in the old times. Times past means old time. And they were a people great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. These are what sometimes people call the giants. When we say giant, we are saying people who are taller than usual. And many of them are taller than usual. So when you see a people great, numerous, and tall, you see that the Emim is a name given to these people who used to sit towards their face in that land, right? They were regarded as giants. Now, in verse 11, how should we say? The word giants here is Rephaim. For some reason, the translators chose this word to translate as giant. In Genesis chapter 6, they also translated the word Nephilim as giant. So you find that the word giants is an English translation of many Hebrew words. And they were regarded, the Emims, they would be the Emims, notice. They were accounted as Rephaim, just like the Anakim. Now the Anakim has a meaning. The Anakim means that there is a lot of neck. That's a very interesting word. Anakim is neck. The neck people, which means that they may have a long neck. I don't know. And the neck made them taller than everybody else. But the Moabites called them Emim. So this is the same group of people we're talking about. And they were tall. But guess what? The Horites formerly dwelt in Seir, but the descendants Esau dispossessed them, destroyed them from before them, and dwelt in their place, just as Israel did the land of their possessions, which the Lord gave. Now, this phrase here, is a commentary that was inserted later, because it has not happened yet at this point in time, as long as you remember that. So what is Moses trying to say? Moses is trying to say this: the Moabites took over the land that the Emims had lived, and they were all removed, and there were no more Emims there, and the Moabites now reside in that land, and God says, don't touch. God has given it to the Moabites. The next one would be the Horites. The Horites lived in the area where the descendants of Esau lived. They went in and they took that land, and the Edomites are now living in that place. And so the Edomites destroyed them from before them. So just as the Emims were removed, the Horites were removed. And then eventually Israel had to do the same. Otherwise, they would be forever enemies in the land. So in those days, when you come and conquer a land, you cannot have the previous people there. Why? Because they would start an uprising sometime. Now back to verse 13. Now rise, cross over the valley of Zered. In verse 13, the valley of Zered or Zered would be up north. So after the Moabites comes the valley of Zered. And we took to come from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed over the valley was 38 years. Now, that's interesting. They went round Mount Seir and then took the time to go up north. The narrative in Numbers seems to be fairly short. But 38 years have passed until all, now this one I've used a different color, until all the generation of the men of war was consumed from the midst of the camp, just as the Lord had sworn them. For indeed the hand of the Lord was against them to destroy them from the midst of the camp until they were consumed. Now let's break this down a little bit. We're looking at the end of verse 14. First of all, we're talking about the generation of the men of war. If you go back to talk about the men of war, this would be in Exodus chapter 12. These are the men 20 years above. They are men of war. There were 600,000 of them. And then God says that this whole generation was consumed. Now, I think it would be useful to understand that the word consumed here is completed, right? Or finished. What do you mean consumed here? And I would suggest to you the word consumed would be they would have all eventually died out. That's what it means. That in completeness, all these 600,000 people died out from the midst of the camp, just as God had sworn to them. What did God swear to them? They will not enter into the promised land. But God did not zap them. God did not open up the ground. God did not send fire from heaven to destroy them. So the word consumed is not really like fire consuming, where we saw, say, Elijah calling on God to send fire from heaven to consume the sacrifice that was drenched in water. So that's not the word. So I would think that this peculiar English word was set in quite misleading, giving us an idea, thinking that God is so terrible in that sense. Then, for indeed the hand of the Lord was against them, because God had sworn against them. So if you see these phrases, just as the Lord had sworn to them, the hand of the Lord was against them, and this would be an A and then a B, right? To destroy them from the midst of the camp. That's a C. right? It's all about the same thing. And so what do you mean by to destroy them? In verse 15, the word here to destroy really is to, how should we say, to cause confusion, it is also with the idea of well, not literally destroy as to kill, but confuse them to the point where they eventually died out. All right, they eventually died out. And so this final word, consume, is completed. This word here is the same as this word. Let me use a different color. This word consume is the same as this word. All right. The picture here is that that generation was not allowed to enter into the promised land, and God waited until all of them died out. That is what we call, I would say, the mercy of God. Right? We've been looking at the faithfulness and now the mercy of God. Verse 16. So it was when all the men of war had finally perished from among the people. What do you mean by perish? In verse 16, the word perish here, finally perish, is literally the word die. Right? And the idea of dying is to come to exist to an end. That's the concept of dying, right? And so they have all died, and the Lord spoke to me saying, this day you are to cross over at Ar, the boundary of Moab. When you come near the people of Ammon, do not harass them or meddle with them. We won't deal with some of these words. It's exactly the same words about Moab. For I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon, because I have given it to the descendants of Lot as a possession. Remember in Genesis chapter 19 and 20, Lot had two sons with his daughters, Ammon and Moab. We are talking about the same. And same thing, that in that land there were Rephaim. Verse 20. This word translated giant is Rephaim. And they were dwelling there in the past. Right? They were dwelling there in the past. Just like the Ammon, but the Ammonites call them now the Zamzumim. The Zamzumim. The Moab called theirs, the Ammon, the Ammonites called them the Zamzumim. A people great, numerous, and tall, as the Anakim. Who are the Anakim? The next. I think they were all the same people, but the Lord destroyed them from before them, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place. The idea of destroy in verse 22 gives us the idea is as God went into devastate them, right? Devastate them. Or exterminate them. Now, always look at these words together because they come in pairs. The Lord destroyed before them, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place. So we have an A and a B. And so that the phrase, the Lord destroyed them, is not that God literally sent fire and wiped them out. God enabled the Ammonites to dispossess them and dwell in their place, and that the Anakims or the Zamzumims eventually died out. That is what the phrase actually means. And it says here, just as he had done for the descendants of Esau, of the Horites, right? From before them, they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place even to this day. Okay. And the Avim who dwelt in the villages as far as Gaza. This Gaza is the same as Gaza today. It sits at the coastal area bordering the Sinai Peninsula. The Kaphtorim in verse 23, the Kaphorite or the Kaphtori, these were the inhabitants that came from the sea, that came from Kaphtor. The word Kaphtor is a place across the Mediterranean, right? Across from Mediterranean. And they lived there long ago in Gaza and destroyed them and dwelt in their place. So the Avim, interestingly, are the people who dwell in the southwest of the, well, what we call the Israel, the land of Israel today. And so Avim took over the Kaphtorim in the land of Gaza. Now in 24, so rise means stand up. Take your journey. Remember what journey is? Pull up. Pull up what? The tent pegs and your tent. Now we cross over to the river Arnon, and look, I've given into your hand. Now, this is the first time that God has said, I've given you. All the previous time says, no, they are all your brethren. The Edomites, the Moabites, as well as the Ammonites. I have given into your hand Sihon, the Amorite king, and his land. Begin to possess it, engage him in battle. This is very different. And in that battle, God says, I will begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the nations under the whole heaven, who shall hear this report of you and shall tremble and be anguished because of you. And this is the beginning of the conquest with Moses. But it is on the eastern part of the Jordan. First of all, Amorite. In Genesis chapter 15, when God told Abraham that in 400 years, the fourth generation thereafter, when the sins of the Amorites are completed, well, this is the Amorite, right? This is the Amorite. And God says, well, the time has come that we will take over the Amorites' land. Not anybody else's land, but Amorites' land. Possess it, engage him in battle, fight with him, and I will begin to put the dread and fear. What is the dread and fear? Verse 25, the first word is dread. Dread is pakad, right? Pakad is the idea of shaking. This is the type of fear. Frightened by shaking. All right. The second word is fear, as in yireh, right? And that would be terror. The fear that's way inside. And you would find that this would be an A and a B. because they have the similar type of expressions and nuance, but different words. And all the nations, now this is now the beginning of using this word nation to conquer them. These are the people under the whole Shamaim, the skies. And we're talking about the skies in that area, not in Assyria, not in Egypt, not anywhere else, but in that area. Why? Because the Israelites are coming, right? Who shall hear this report of you? Report means word of mouth. Well, they didn't have internet then. They didn't use smoke signals, but people will talk about them. And this word is to quake, like an earthquake. And it gives us a similar nuance as these words: dread and fear and tremble and be in anguish. What is anguish? Now, this idea of anguish is in pain, but it gives us a picture of labor pain. That it comes and goes. They hear about Israel and they are so scared. That is the picture of the people around there, that when Israel comes, shake in your pants because of you. So the fear of you here means the fear there is no, well, the fear of you, the fear that belongs to you, the fear that comes from them, right? The fear, the terror that when you hear the name of Israel, they will shake. And that is what it means by the fear of you. Verse 26, I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to Sihon, king of Heshbon, and the words of peace, say, let me pass through your land. I will keep strictly to the road. I will turn neither to the right nor to the left. Now, this is a Hebrew saying. When you keep on the straight road, and they say, I will keep strictly to the straight and narrow. I will neither turn to the right nor to the left, meaning in Malay, you don't belok. You don't take a side turn. And that's what Moses is saying. I will come through and I will just stay on the king's highway. And what I would need you to do is to sell me food, and I'll pay that I may eat. Give me water, and I will pay that I may drink. But let me pass through on foot. I'm going to walk through, just as the descendants of Esau in Seir, the Moabites in Ar, until I cross the Jordan to the land which the Lord our God is giving us. And they have gone way far up north. And it's past Moab, it's past Ammon, and now they're at Amorite territory. But the king of Sihon, or Sihon, king of Heshbon, says, no, you will not pass through. And this is another Hebrew phrase. The Lord your God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate. Look at this word. The idea of hardened, verse 30, made hard, cause to be stubborn. Hardening the heart is stubborn. And then the next word here is made him made his heart obstinate. Tells us that his heart was strong, right? His heart was made to be strong, firm. And what do you read from this? We have an A and a B. And both speaks about a hardening where they will not let the people of God pass through. And how do you say that the Lord, your God, hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate? It literally means that by the sheer presence of the Israelites, the things that they hear about the Israelites, about what God has done for the Israelites, God somehow set the perception of Sihon, the king of Heshbon, to be very arrogant, just like Pharaoh. Pharaoh hardened his heart. God hardened his heart by showing him who God is, the true and living God. And in this case, same thing is happening, that he might deliver him into your hands, as is this day, that the king of Sihon will want to fight. In verse 31, the Lord said to me, see, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. What do you mean begin? In verse 31, the idea here is to start something, right? The word begun is to start. What is the start? The start of the inheritance. The start of the inheritance. And so begin to possess it, that you may inherit his land. Now, let me just explain this word possess to you. The idea of possess is also to dispossess. Okay, this is one word that has both meanings. You can take possession, you can occupy, or you can cause the other person to be dispossessed or to disinherit it. And so this is an idea of both sides. When God says, go and possess, then the other side will lose the possession, that you may inherit it. And the word inherit in this case is also to take possession. To take possession. And this word inherit and this word possess are related words. So this will be an A and a B. To possess it means to inherit his land. Then Sihon and all his people came out against us to fight at Yahatz. And the Lord our God delivered him over to us. Verse 33, the idea of delivered means basically to give. You see, when God did not give the people to them, the Israelites cannot win the battle. So that's the phrase, to give. And so when God just now, we read, do not do anything with the Edomites, do not do anything with the Moabites, with the Ammonites. Why? Because God did not give you the land and did not give them over to you. That's the same word. So whenever we see God gave, you can safely be assured that they will defeat the enemies, his sons and all his people. We took all his cities at that time and we utterly destroyed the men. In verse 34, the idea here is that when we say we took, that means we seized, right? By force, obviously. And we utterly destroyed them. And this word here is haram, right? Haram, which is from the same idea of injustice, violence, and they actually took over the men. And then it says, the women, the little ones of every city, and we left nothing remaining. And here, there is actual killing taking place. And the whole idea here is to either exterminate, destroy them, or to divide them up. And we left nothing remaining. And the word remaining is very telling. This is what it means by remaining. They left nothing remaining, no one remaining, which means that you could see the men, the women, and the little ones. They were all destroyed. Haram, right? And we took only the livestock as plunder for ourselves with the spoil of the cities which we took. In the old days, when you win a war, you take the whatever is valuable to you. And from Aroer, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, from the city that is in the ravine, as far as Gilead, which is south of the Lake of Galilee, there was not one city too strong for us, for the Lord our God delivered all to us. Remember the word deliver? Give. And so they are starting to take over this part of the land. Only you did not go near the land of the people of Ammon along the river Yabok, or to the cities of the mountains, or wherever the Lord had forbidden us. The idea here of forbidden us, you find it very strange, is that this is commanded. Same word as giving a command. That everywhere that God has commanded to do or not to do. And so the translators took a liberty to translate it as forbidden. They interpreted this. And so the idea I want to leave with you before we end today is this. Moses is now telling them, in the earlier part, they did not listen. So out of the time that they were there, they eventually died out. And now the young generation has grown up and they went up north and they did everything that God had commanded. And what God says don't do, they didn't do. So this is to show us that in chapter 2, there was also obedience of the new generation. That Moses led them and they started to take possession of the promised land. And remember, this part of the promised land is above Ammon and all the way up, I would say, to the Amorite territory of the eastern shore of the Galilee. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 2.